When most of us picture a werewolf, we imagine moonlight, a sudden transformation, and a creature caught between the human world and the wild. But the original story is much older than the movies. Long before silver bullets and full moon curses, people were already telling stories about humans becoming wolves. And those stories were often less about monsters than about choices, fear, and the thin line between civilization and instinct. Whether werewolves are real is a question each viewer can decide for themselves. What we can say for certain is that the werewolf is something just as interesting. A story people have used for thousands of years to talk about fear, morality, wilderness, punishment, and identity. The werewolf survives because it is simple enough to understand instantly, but deep enough to keep changing with every culture that retells it. So let's go back before the horror movie, before the silver bullet, before the foggy forest and the cinematic full moon. Let's go back to the older question at the heart of the legend. What happens when a human being becomes something wild? In the myth, Zeus visits Lycaon's household in disguise. Lycaon wants to know whether this stranger is truly a god, so he commits an unforgivable act. He serves Zeus a meal meant to test divine knowledge and moral judgment. But the heart of the tale stays the same. Lycaon crosses a sacred boundary. He breaks the laws of hospitality, justice, and humanity itself. Zeus recognizes the crime immediately, and the punishment fits the symbol. Lycaon is transformed into a wolf. His mouth changes, his voice becomes a howl, and his body takes on the form of the violence within him. That is an important difference from many modern werewolf stories. Today, we often imagine the werewolf as a tragic victim, someone bitten, cursed, or infected through no fault of their own. Lycaon is different. His transformation is a judgment. The story says, in effect, that becoming a wolf is not an accident. It is the outward form of an inward failure. To modern ears, the myth is unsettling, and it should be handled carefully. Ancient myths often include disturbing details, and we do not need to sensationalize them. What matters for our purpose is the meaning. Lycaon violates trust. Zeus comes as a guest, and hospitality was sacred. A stranger at the door was not just a stranger. In many ancient cultures, the way you treated a guest revealed the moral order of your world. By breaking that trust, Lycaon becomes a warning. He is what happens when power loses humility, when curiosity becomes cruelty, and when a ruler forgets that authority is supposed to protect people, not prey on them. That transformation was not random. In the ancient world, the wolf could represent danger, hunger, exile, and life beyond the safety of the city. To become a wolf was to be pushed outside human society. Lycaon's body changes because, in the story's moral logic, his actions have already made him less than human. That is what makes the original werewolf story so powerful. It is not simply asking, what if a person became a beast? It is asking, what makes a person lose their humanity? For the people who told these stories, the wolf was not just a symbol from a storybook. Wolves were real animals living at the edge of farms, roads, and settlements. They could threaten livestock. They could haunt the imagination of travelers. Even when actual attacks were uncommon, the possibility was enough to give the animal enormous symbolic power. That symbolic power worked in two directions. On one hand, the wolf was feared as a predator. On the other hand, it was admired for strength, endurance, and freedom. This double meaning is part of why werewolf stories feel so rich. The wolf is not only evil, it is wild. It belongs to a world beyond fences, laws, lamps, and city walls. So when a person becomes a wolf, the story is really asking where the boundary is. What separates a citizen from an outlaw? A guest from a threat? A ruler from a tyrant? A human voice from a howl? Lycaon's story is tied closely to Arcadia, a mountainous region of Greece that ancient writers associated with rustic life, old customs, and wolves. The name Lycaon itself sounds close to Greek words connected with wolves, and Mount Lycaon was associated with Zeus Lycaeus, sometimes understood as Wolf Zeus. Some ancient accounts connect this place with rituals that later writers found shocking or mysterious. As with many ancient traditions, we should be careful. We are often looking through layers of storytelling, rumor, religious interpretation, and later commentary.
But what is clear is that Arcadia gave the werewolf legend a setting where wolves, sacred power, and human transformation could all meet. In that setting, the werewolf is not just a monster wandering through trees. It is part of a bigger, ancient imagination. Mountains were places of danger and holiness. Forests were places where ordinary rules felt weaker. A person who crossed into that world might come back changed, or might not come back as fully human at all. This helps explain why the werewolf has always been connected to thresholds: night and day, village and wilderness, person and animal, reason and appetite. The werewolf lives at the border. That is why it continues to work so well in stories. It is never only one thing.
Over time, stories of human-to-wolf transformations spread and changed. Greek and Roman writers connected wolves with curses, rituals, and shapeshifting. Later, across medieval Europe, werewolf legends took on new meanings. Some tales were moral warnings, others reflected fear of the wilderness, fear of violence, or fear of people who lived outside the rules of the community. The familiar full moon transformation came much later as the legend kept evolving through folklore, literature, and film. That is important to remember. Myths are not frozen in time. They travel, they adapt. Each generation reshapes them to explain its own fears. In Rome, writers used words like versipellis, meaning something like turn skin, for a person believed to change shape. That image is vivid, a person whose skin, identity, or outward form can turn. It captures the basic fear behind lycanthropy, the fear that the familiar human surface might hide something else underneath. By the Middle Ages, werewolf stories had taken several different paths. Some were frightening tales about dangerous outsiders. Some were connected to accusations of magic or curses, but others were surprisingly sympathetic. In medieval romance, a werewolf could be a noble person trapped in animal form by betrayal or enchantment. In those stories, the wolf body hides a human mind. That is a major shift. Lycaon becomes a wolf because his behavior is inhuman. But some medieval werewolves are human beings whose true character remains honorable even when their bodies change. Instead of asking, what crime made this person a monster? Those stories ask, can we recognize humanity when it appears in an unfamiliar form? That is one reason the legend has so many versions. It can be a warning about losing control. It can be a story about injustice. It can be a symbol of exile. It can even become a story about loyalty, patience, and being misunderstood. Now let's talk about something many viewers may be waiting for: the full moon. The moon is so strongly connected to werewolves today that it feels ancient. But the strict rule that a werewolf transforms under the full moon is not the core of the oldest Lycaon story. It becomes much more familiar through later folklore, literature, and especially film. That does not make it meaningless. The moon is perfect storytelling. It changes shape. It governs the night sky. It makes the ordinary world look strange. A full moon turns a familiar road, field, or forest into a place of shadows. So even if the full moon is not the beginning of the werewolf, it became one of the most powerful images attached to it. The same is true of silver bullets. They are now one of the classic pieces of werewolf lore, but they belong more to the modern monster toolkit than to the earliest myth. Ancient Lycaon is not defeated by silver. He is punished by transformation. That difference helps us see how the story changed from moral myth into creature feature. Modern werewolves often work like a disease, a curse, or an alter ego. They raise questions about repression and release. What do we hide? What comes out under pressure? What happens when the part of ourselves we try to control takes over? That modern version is powerful, but it is worth remembering that the older version asks a different question. Lycaon's story is not mainly about losing control by accident. It is about what happens when someone with power chooses cruelty and then becomes the image of that choice. The werewolf has lasted because it gives a shape to something people have always understood. We all have instincts, anger, fear, and hunger inside us. The story becomes frightening when those forces take over. But it is also meaningful because it reminds us that humanity is not just something we are born with. It is something we practice through our choices. The werewolf is not only a monster story, it is a mirror. It shows us what ancient people feared, what they valued, and how they used storytelling to talk about right and wrong.
And maybe that is why, thousands of years later, the howl of the werewolf still feels familiar. There is also a reason the werewolf remains easier to trust as a story than as a claim. Real wolves are animals with their own place in nature, not villains from a legend. Human fear has often turned wolves into symbols of everything outside our control. A responsible retelling can respect both sides, the historical fear that shaped the myth and the real animal behind the symbol. From ancient Mesopotamia to Arcadia, from Roman poetry to medieval romance, the werewolf has never been only about claws. It has always been about transformation, and the fear that something human can cross a line and not easily return. The next time you see a werewolf on screen, remember, behind the claws and moonlight is one of humanity's oldest questions. What keeps the human heart from becoming wild?